Hi, I'm Michelle Koppel. I'm an enrolled agent with HZ CPAs, and today I want to answer the question, what is the deadline for applying to get the ERC? So we should know that now we are retroactively filing forms to collect the ERC, Employee Retention Tax Credit, for the years 2020 and 2021. So the form that we file is the Form 941X. Now, before I tell you what the deadline is for filing that form, I want to share with you some of our experiences in filing it. So we have a lot of people who we have filed these forms for, and they got a check in 4 to 6 months. Now you get a check for each quarter. So a check gets mailed to you. It's not direct deposit. The 941X cannot be e-filed. It must be paper filed. So it takes some time to get to the IRS. So a lot of people have gotten checks within 4 to 6 months, but oftentimes they get 4 out of 5 of the quarters a check for those. And there's one odd quarter that they haven't been paid for yet. And some other people have filed in 2021 and have still not gotten a check. So I call the IRS pretty regularly to check in on what the issue is, because it isn't electronically filed and we don't know what the problem is. Sometimes we will get a letter from the IRS saying this is incomplete, or they're just not, the letters that we get that tell us something's missing are not really detailed. So I call the IRS, and what I have found a number of times is things like this. The IRS is missing one page of the 941X. The IRS is missing the original 941, so they cannot amend the 941X. They didn't get it at all. It's not in their system. It goes into the IRS Bermuda Triangle, and no one has seen it. So it takes us about 6 months to even find out if the IRS has entered the information. So I start calling the IRS at about 4 or 5 months if the client hasn't heard anything. And at that point, I can find something out usually, because the IRS usually has it entered into the system. Then it gets assigned to an agent. Then it starts to be processed. And there are different steps within the processing of that form. So it may be 6 months in that you've paper filed it and it's finally gotten onto the IRS system, into their software. In the time in between from when it's been sent until that time, we may not even know it got lost in the mail or whatever. I am telling people send things, return receipt. But so it takes us 6 months to find out. And then they tell us, oh, we can't file because you are missing the original 941, or we are missing a page of the 941X. And sometimes they just say, well, send in the original 941 and we'll process it. But again, you get back in line, because if you're going to send a paper filed 941 for the years 2020 and 2021, it's going to take another 6 months before it actually gets into the system. Now, I've had other issues where the IRS got the quarters mixed up. And this is very important, because in 2021, you get 70% of the wages. And in 2020, it's 50% of the wages, up to $10,000 per employee for the whole year. So the terms change. So it's important that we have them falling into the right quarters. There have just been some mix-ups. I don't want to blame the IRS. They're really inundated with paperwork at this point. But there just have been other issues like that where, they got the wrong quarter, or they're missing something. And sometimes they just send it back, just say, well, we're missing a page, or you didn't do the original 941, so we're just going to essentially reject it, which doesn't mean they're rejecting the ERC. It means you have to resubmit the form. So then we resubmit it and we're back in line again. And so it's another 4 to 6 months before we can even check on it. And so it becomes really important to understand that I have people out there, it's been nearly 18 months and they're in the system. I've checked with the IRS, but it's not processed yet for whatever reason. So I want you to keep that in mind when we talk about what the deadlines are. So if we want to go to the deadlines, of course, this is Form 941X, you probably know. And so we go to the instructions, we go to irs.gov and we look up and search for what are the instructions for the 941X that are going to tell me what are the due dates. So let me share with you what this says, because I think it's best to just go with originally. Find it, share screen. Okay, there we go. All right, so these are the instructions for the 941X, and I am down on page 5. So this is there a deadline for filing the Form 941X? Now remember, we are filing for the years 2020 and 2021, so we have to keep that in mind. So generally, you have, okay, at the beginning, you may correct overreported taxes on previously filed Form 941 if you file 941X within 3 years of the date the 941 was filed, or 2 years from the date you paid the tax, whichever is later. You may correct underreported taxes on previously filed 941 if you filed 941X within 3 years of the date the 941 was filed. Okay, so the oldest quarters that we're filing are second quarter 2020. So in the second quarter 2020, we include a little bit of first quarter of 2020, but it's filed on the second quarter of 2020. So that due date would be July 31st, 2020, add 3 years, July 31st, 2023. However, there's always some other little instruction that follows there. Okay. And then it says, we call this, each of these timeframes, a period of limitations. For the period of limitations, Forms 941 for a calendar year are considered filed on April 15th of the succeeding year if filed before that date. So if you filed your 941s on time, then 2020 is technically due for the period of limitations on April the 15th, 2021. So now let's add 3 years to that. That gets us to April the 15th, 2024. So that's going to be your absolute deadline is April 15th, 2024 for 2020. And in 2021, it'll be April the 15th, 2025. Well, that seems like way out there. I don't have to worry. Why is there a rush? Well, this is the reason I started to tell you about some of the issues that we have had. Because if we take some of the things that we filed already and we go back 18 months from the final due date. So the final due date, we put April 15th, 2024, you subtract out 18 months. Where does that land you? October 2022. Now, I think we need to file these immediately just because I see these issues and not wait till the end. We don't know what the IRS will do if something happens when you file the form and we don't find out for 6 months, they are missing something or they missed a page. And believe me, they're not going to say, well, I believe you that you filed it, or you've got a return receipt. If you missed something, there's no guarantee you're going to get that money back. So like I said, we have a lot of people out there who've gotten 4 out of 5 of the quarters, and maybe it's $50,000 or $100,000 that they're waiting for. And they're just sitting in there in a long queue. Now, if we reflect back to what happened with the EIDL, the EIDL was a loan program that came out of the CARES Act, and all these people qualified. And it was just, again, they were inundated, so I don't want to blame anyone. But what happened, there were a lot of people who had filed all their forms way in advance of the closing of the program. And they had filed, they qualified, they were 100% qualified, and they just ran into just sort of incompetence on the other side of the coin. And so at the end, they just had a deadline and that was it. And all these people just didn't get the EIDL. So we don't know what's going to happen with this hard deadline of April 15th, 2024 and April 15th of 2025 for the years 2020 and 2021 for the ERC. We don't really know what will happen if there's some kind of glitch at the end. And this is why I'm encouraging everyone file today, because if we run into any problems, it gives us the time to fix it. It gives me the 6 months on a paper filing that it's going to take to get into the IRS system for me to find out, is there a problem? What is the problem? How do we address it? Or are you just going to be rejected and have to resubmit? So we don't know how it's going to be handled. And that's why I want to advise you all to file as soon as possible. So this is Michelle Koppel. I'm an enrolled agent with HZ CPAs, and I'm an expert in the ERC. Please send me your questions and I'll try to answer everything that you ask. Thanks again.